In 2014, 13,000 US Marines descended on the jagged mountain corridors of South Korea for Exercise Ssang Yong, the largest amphibious landing drill in history. But while the world watched the massive display of firepower, a small unit of Marines was retreating into the shadows of an abandoned rural schoolhouse known as a Pey-gyo. During a routine security sweep, they pushed open the door of a forgotten shed in the far back of the property and found a scene that no combat manual could explain. A meticulously arranged pentagram of dead cats surrounded by the guttered remains of burned candles. The geometry was chillingly precise, adhering to the mathematical golden ratio phi equals 1 plus the square root of 52 to create a stable conduit for what the locals fear most. In a culture where the feline is a harbinger of reanimated corpses and malignant curses, this wasn't just a discovery, it was a sensory rupture. Why was this dark ritual hidden in the path of a massive military operation? And what were those Marines truly sleeping next to? We are going inside the schoolhouse to uncover the ritualistic darkness that still breathes in the shadows of the twin dragons. Imagine you are 19 years old, thousands of miles from home, standing in the jagged mountain corridors of the Korean Peninsula. It is March 2014, and you are part of a machinery so vast it feels like the earth itself is shaking. You are a US Marine, and you've just stepped off the USS Bonhomme Richard into a landscape that feels like it belongs to another century. This was Exercise Ssang Yong, the Twin Dragons, one of the largest amphibious landing drills in history, involving over 13,000 personnel. But while the world was watching the high-tech display of Ospreys and HIMARS rockets, a small group of Marines was about to encounter something that no amount of combat training could prepare them for. For the Marines of Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, the mission was tactical: maneuver under fire, seize objectives, and maintain a presence in the Pohang region. But logistics in a foreign land are rarely simple. When the sun dipped behind the mountains and the freezing rain began to whip across the Suseong-ri range, the Marines weren't retreating to a modern base. They were billeted in a Pey-gyo, an abandoned Korean schoolhouse. In rural South Korea, these abandoned schools are symbols of a miracle on the Han River that left the countryside behind. Between 1982 and 2016, thousands of schools closed as the youth fled for the cities. These buildings are shells of the past, standing empty in the middle of rice paddies or at the edge of encroaching forests. For a Marine, a Pey-gyo is a functional barracks, large rooms for sleeping mats, a perimeter for security. But in the local culture, these are liminal spaces, places where the boundary between the living and the dead is dangerously thin. As the Marines settled into the schoolhouse, the atmosphere was already heavy. Every Korean student knows the legends that haunt these halls. They whisper about the Kong Kong ghost, the spirit of a girl driven to madness by the pressure to be number one in her class. Legend says she pushed her rival off the roof, and now she haunts the school, walking on her head with a heavy, rhythmic thumping Kong, Kong, Kong. For the Marines, these were just stories, urban legends to kill time during a long deployment. But that changed during a routine security sweep of the property. Behind the schoolhouse, past the overgrown playground and the rusted statues of historical figures, stood a lone shed. It was tucked away in the far back, where the manicured school grounds surrendered to the dark, tangled woods of the mountainside. When the Marines pushed open that door, the smell of gunpowder and diesel was instantly replaced by something sickeningly sweet and ancient, the scent of cold wax and rotting organic matter. There, on the dirt floor of the shed, was a sight that defied military logic. A pentagram had been meticulously traced, and at its 5 points lay the carcasses of dead cats. Burned down candles stood as silent sentries around the geometry of the ritual. This wasn't just a random act of cruelty, it was a deliberate, calculated invocation of something dark. To understand the chill that discovery sent through those Marines, you have to understand the place of the cat in the Korean psyche. Historically, cats in Korea were not seen as pets, but as harbingers of evil, disease, and death. In the late 19th century, it was believed that cats possessed a malignant aura so potent that if one jumped over a corpse, the body would stand upright, unable to find peace. The ritual in that shed was a physical manifestation of a deep-seated regional dread. Perhaps it was a dark gut, a perversion of a traditional shamanistic trance ritual where a mudang, a shaman, communicates with the spirits. In certain extreme cases, these rituals involve the sacrifice of animals to placate the saja, the death messengers who escort souls to the afterlife. But the use of the pentagram, a largely Western symbol, suggested a hybrid form of occultism, a modern fringe group tapping into ancient fears. The pentagram itself is a masterclass in geometric malice. Constructed entirely by the golden ratio, or phi, it is a symbol of balance and the relationship between the macrocosm and the microcosm. The formula for this perfect ratio is expressed as phi equals 1 plus the square root of 52. In its upright form, the pentagram represents the 5 elements: fire, water, earth, air, and spirit, with spirit reigning supreme. But when inverted, as it often is in rituals involving sacrifice, it represents the goat of lust and the triumph of the material world over the spiritual. By placing the cats at the points of this star, the practitioner was essentially tuning the ritual to the specific frequencies of death and misfortune associated with felines in Korea. Think about the psychological state of those Marines. They were trained for the kinetic, for the impact of a 5.56mm round or the blast of a mortar. They were operating in a state of high arousal, fueled by the adrenaline of live fire training and the physical exhaustion of the field. Suddenly, they were confronted with a variable that couldn't be neutralized with a weapon system. This was a sensory rupture, a moment where the tactical world and the spiritual world collided in the silence of an abandoned shed. The discovery left a lingering shadow. While the Marines continued their drills at Rodriguez Range and Doksokri Beach, the memory of that shed remained. It served as a reminder that they were not just occupiers of land, but observers of a history they didn't fully understand. In the hills of Korea, the twin dragons aren't just names on an exercise map. They represent the duality of the peninsula, the modern high-tech surface, and the ancient ritualistic darkness that still breathes in the shadows of the Pey-gyo. Today, many of these abandoned schoolhouses have found a new purpose. In Tongyong, one such school was recently transformed into a public cat sanctuary, a place of healing and protection. It's a poetic reversal of the fears that once saturated the rural countryside. But for those who were there in 2014, the redemptive turn doesn't erase the memory of what was found in the far back shed. The true story of the 2014 schoolhouse discovery is a case study in the unseen frontier. It tells us that even in the middle of a massive military operation, the most profound encounters aren't always with a notional enemy force. Sometimes they are with the ghosts of a culture's past, arranged in a star of dead cats and flickering candles, waiting in the silence of a forgotten room. As you look at the jagged mountains of South Korea today, remember that every abandoned building has a story, and some stories are better left undisturbed. Because when you step into a Pey-gyo, you aren't just walking through a building, you're walking through a doorway, and you never know what might be waiting on the other side, whispering, "Not here," or "Here," as it thumps through the empty hallways in the dead of night.